When your old career gives you lemons, throw in some ice, mix in some vodka, and call it a podcast. From the Mac of All Trades studio in Fairport, and driven by Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, it's Billified, the Bill Moran Podcast.
Thanks for getting your pot on. Thanks for telling a friend. That's how we spread the word about the pirate ship. This is a solo. It's just me. Yeah, you may want to turn it off right now. I don't know. I hope not. I'm going to do these once in a while. Just me. I think like once a month. Thoughts on different things. And if you ever, maybe I'm a fool to even say this, but if you ever have a topic that you'd like to hear my thoughts on, I would be happy to do that on these kind of episodes. But we're going to throw these in every once in a while. I've had a lot over the past couple of days, and my head's been in many different places, and kind of spinning around. Right? You got like all of us, all kinds of things. But one of the things I see, and there was a headline that recently grabbed me in it, and I guess it was focused on Matthew McConaughey, and it said sometimes the best thing to do is to step away from a parent, right? From your parents. I think the actual headline is why breaking up with a parent is sometimes the right choice. And it kind of makes me sad, and probably because I just had yet one more memorial service for my dad that I'd like to explain a little bit more than I did on the previous episode. But it brings everything sort of to light. And I'm having a hard time being a parent myself. It's fucking hard, man. It is fucking hard to be a parent. I think it's harder today to be a parent than it was when I was part of the raising, I guess I can say that, of my older two boys who are in their early to mid-20s right now. It's harder. There's more information that is available to everybody in an instant. And I think there's also some of that shows you like, hey, do your parents, I don't know what it is, but your parents do this, tell them the blah, blah, blah. I have no idea if that's in my head, but I think that it just is harder now, and I'm having a bit of a tough time parenting my kid, and I'm trying to do it in, I hate the term gentle parenting, but almost like I want you to know you're heard. You're a 15-year-old person. I want you to know you're heard and you matter, and whatever you have will work in consideration. I'll give you one. Like, you see how I'm dressed today. It's kind of how I wanted him to dress when we went to the memorial service for my dad. And he was upset, didn't like it, thought it looked ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And maybe I made the wrong choice, but I said, okay, wear that, bring a shirt you would rather wear, and after dinner on the boat, you can change. And that's what he did. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but it felt like somewhat of a compromise. That way you're heard, we got our thing. I have no idea. And that's why I think all this is kind of hitting me. And I think for anybody who's a parent, it's tough. It's tough in today's day and age. And it used to be my way or the highway, and that just doesn't seem to work anymore because there's so much information available and so many different influences on your kids that they know my way or the highway is fucking old school, and they're not, you know what I mean? They're not having any of it. It is how I see it. So, I try to more or less be a guide. And don't forget, he and his mom and I separated when he was 9. So there's, obviously that would be traumatic, is what I think. So, going back to, because the memorial service was for my dad, a lot of times the only experience that we have being a parent, right, there, you always hear people go, there's no manual on how to be a parent. No, there's not. And I think a lot of it has to come from gut or what your parents did. And sometimes what your parents did may not have been the best thing, so that doesn't work, or maybe it does work, or maybe you do the exact opposite of your parents. I certainly feel like some family members of mine do the opposite of what our parents did. However, I will say this. I don't think that any parent is the same to each child. I think that you parent each kid differently. You just do. And that's a necessity at times. I think Laura, who's on the podcast, said it best once. She worries that, her one son feels like the other kid gets attention. She said, but he needs it because of this. And she wrote him a letter that she's going to give him later on in life. And I go, boy, that to me is like, that's great parenting, right? Because I can't explain it to you now. You're not going to see it. You're not going to understand it. But I want you to know, I want you to always know, especially as you look back on your life, that you were loved and supported. And I think that's such an important thing to say. And I say that now because my dad he was a different cat, man. He was just a different dude in certain ways. Certainly presented from his exterior, extremely conservative. Suits, ties, the whole thing. One of the funniest mofos I've ever been around in my life. I remember being at St. John Fisher College. He comes to visit, stuffing beers in his socks and walking around and doing all this. And people just laughing and loving him and wanting, always excited when he would come visit me at camp. He was it was the life of the party in a sense, and yet had this very, very serious side. But he didn't get sports, and he didn't get things. And this past weekend, we had the memorial service, and the reason we did was he was up in Maine, and things transpired in Maine, and he said, I would like to have a church service, an open casket, and I want to be cremated. Then I want, when a couple months pass and the dust settles, I'd like you to have a big party. And we thought, down in the Hudson Valley, where he spent majority of his life, where he built the home we grew up in, would be the best place to have it. And there were a lot of coworkers that he had and friends that he had and friends of the family that still live there or could get there much easier than they could Maine. So we thought, okay, we'll do this. And my sister did an amazing job putting this all together, and it was a lovely weekend. It hit me harder than it did when it happened in Maine. It hit me a lot harder. And I was going to tell this story. I was going to tell this story because, of course, they have me kick off the pass the mic to tell stories about, our dad. And there were some wonderful ones, really, really great. So I start, and what I was going to say is I'm back at St. John Fisher University working on a master's in mental health counseling. I submitted my first paper, a really simple thing, and I was going to call him. And I realized, oh my gosh, I can't call him. And those are the moments that when you see a headline like the one I shared just a few minutes ago, why breaking up with a parent is sometimes the right choice, it just kind of hits me different. I'm not saying if you feel like that's the best thing for you, you got to do what is the best thing for you in your life. But either way, so it just kind of hits me different. And I was about to tell that story. And we were on the boat on the upper deck because it was sunset and we were watching the sunset as we did this. And I look, and right in front of me is my mother, who was married to my dad for almost 38, 34, somewhere between 34. I got to think 38 years before they separated. And I did call her after I submitted my paper to Fisher. But I didn't want to say, I don't know why. It was one of these things where I'm like, I don't want to say, I was going to call my dad, but you were second best, is how I felt she would hear it. So I didn't do that. But this all made me think a lot about my parents, right? You don't want to hurt one's feelings. Sometimes you felt like you were walking on eggshells. They are people too. They have feelings. They have stuff. And as you parent yourself, you kind of draw back on those memories. My old man, I would always think like he didn't understand radio, right? He didn't like that. He didn't care for it. He didn't understand it. So right there, you could kind of go, well, he never supported me. No, what my dad had was a love of knowledge, an absolute love of knowledge. Yes, he was highly educated, but I think even if he wasn't, he had a love of knowledge. He had words that were just, you would never hear in your life. Ort, the little bit of food on your face, which, by the way, I'm hearing is offensive now in some cultures. I don't know. I think there's another word. Well, I won't get into it, but it means to. I think it's lasking about adding urine to like the tanning of leather and things, or well, whatever. The guy had a love of knowledge. The point being that was where his strong suit was, but he allowed each of us to go find our own way. We were never forced. It wasn't like, why aren't you going into the family business? Not that there was one, but like teaching. Why don't you follow in the footsteps of your parents? None of us really did. And I guess the closest would be my sister, but nobody really did. They all kind of went on their own, and you were allowed to do that, which I thought was really, really wonderful when I look back. You were not forced into doing anything. Now, my father would tell me all the time, when I hear a voice come on the radio, I push the button. Like, you could take that and it could destroy your confidence or whatever. I don't know why it didn't. Maybe I kind of knew inherently that may be true for him, but it wasn't like he wasn't supporting me. Don't forget, I played football. I look up in the stands. He's doing a crossword puzzle. He didn't get it, but he was there. That's my point. He was there. And I think that's maybe the best thing you can always do as a parent. Sure, you're going to fuck up. You're going to mess things up. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to piss a kid off. You're going to embarrass your kid, maybe embarrass yourself. And as a result, the kid is embarrassed. Whatever happens, I don't know. But I think when it comes down to the bottom line, it's feeling loved and supported. I mean, this is a guy who always talked about, not listening to the radio. He was so proud he bought a new car. I've never had the radio on in the car ever. And I would always look around at my family and go, that's how I make my money. Why would you know what I mean? Why would you say? But that's okay. Because he was at comedy shows. He came up once. He was here for, I think, one of my sons had Grandparents' Day, Jordan, in high school. And my father shows up in a 3-piece tweed suit looking like he's about to negotiate Brexit. And after he was at Grandparents' Day, he came over. I was on the radio, and he wanted to see what was going on. So he sat in the studio. And I offered him a mic. He said no. And then as we're talking, all of a sudden I hear a voice. It's him. He's trying to chime into the conversation. And when I said put a mic, I don't know if it was a fear of his, but he did love it, and he did like some of the banter that went on the radio. He did, and somehow that was communicated. Maybe not directly. Certainly, what was communicated is I don't listen to the radio. Oh, that's fine. That's your choice. But I guess I never really fully felt unsupported. And there was one story that I wish I had shared about my dad. And again, maybe it's these moments that later on we all find out about our parents, and our kids will find out about us, that there was something that we did. My dad wasn't big on drama, and he wasn't big on making a big stand on things, unless you were buying a $78 bottle of wine at Thanksgiving dinner, which is another story. But there was a time when in radio they decided that they wanted me to do a stunt. Right, and there were these companies that went around and did radio stunts. So I was to be entombed in concrete for 48 hours. They would I would lay down in this thing, and they would pour the concrete over top this like coffin, basically. So all these people are gathered there. I don't even think. Well, I probably was at that point about a year into my marriage, and had my first child already, Jackson. And I think it might have been 2 years into our marriage. And then I think my wife was pregnant with our second child. That's what it was at the time. So I am going to be entombed in concrete. And my father had come up. And again, you talk about like feeling supported and loved. Had a townhouse, was taking wallpaper off the bathroom or something, wanted to paint it yellow. The walls were a little goofed up from, any construction. When they do these, let me just say this real quick, because I did work on some construction crews, especially years ago on condos, and some of those will come in what they call prefab. They'll already have segments of the walls done and the wires already through everything. So the drywall's on there, the beams, It's all in there, and they're wired, and all you got to do is kind of just hook it up. It's sort of a plug and play. It's called prefab. And I think sometimes, I'm not sure if the condos I lived in or actually owned at the time was a prefab or not. But I know that the walls were a little buckled and things like that. So my dad was coming up to help me kind of smooth some things out. I wanted to hang a different door. And if you know anything about doors, it can become a pain in the ass if the framing isn't exactly right? So you're shimming and doing this shit. So he came up to do that, and then I was being entombed in concrete. So my mother came over with my wife to watch me be entombed, and they got very upset because it basically was the shape of a coffin. And I just laid in this thing. And I will admit, I had started to have a mini panic attack, but I can go into that thing where I'm just like, okay, dude, you said you were going to do this. We're going to do it. Let's just breathe. And I pretended like it was a fort, and I was a kid, and I had the internet, and I did stay in there for 48 hours. There are many other radio morons that tried this and didn't stay for 48 hours. So, that being said, my father then went up because my wife and mother were so upset. My mother was so upset it was like watching me be buried, and it was just driving her nuts. So, of course, when, it's like my father used to always say, just clean your room. I don't want to hear your mother. Right, that would be. But she got to him, and so he went up to see it himself and then realized that there was only one air hole that was kind of going down and providing air to me. They had like almost like, I guess you could call it like a periscope, right? That people could talk to you through it, and it was your only air source down in there. So, and this is radio, man. This is how radio worked. Not everybody was great at covering all the bases. You know what I mean? And you can never, it's bad because who do you point the finger at? Because you go, well, why at the top? Well, somebody was delegating. There was promotions teams, programming teams, and all this stuff, but nobody found like security to kind of stay around the clock. And I don't think anybody thought about it. I'm not sure if I know I didn't think about it, but I don't even know if I were in charge if I would have thought about it. And my father gets there and sees this and realizes that that's the only air source, and is like, shit, man, if some prankster comes and covers that hole, there's going to be nothing. Like, he's going to suffocate in there and die. So my dad stayed the weekend. I think my brother, who was going to school in Ithaca at the time, came up. He was at Cornell. And the two of them sat all night long. Because I was in there for 48 hours. So 2 nights, overnights, while I was in there. I had no idea. I never really knew that until like years later. Once I got really upset with my father over something. And it might have been like I didn't feel like I was supported. I don't even know. And I heard that story, and I was like, oh, my God. Like, it almost brought me to tears because it was one of the most loving things. And he never said a fucking word. He went to the radio station, guys, and goes, do you have security overnight? If somebody covers that hole, if somebody does something, and they're like, oh. And yeah, we got security, and nothing. So my dad stayed every night. And I guess that's kind of the point for all of this. Maybe this is more for me. I don't know. But the fact that there was such love, and I do remember like the last time I talked to him, and I'll always wish I turned around and looked down the hallway at him as he was there. I said, I love you so much. And he said, there's so much love from this end for you. And that was always true. And I think sometimes we don't feel it. And I think as the child, and I think sometimes as the parent, we feel misunderstood, and maybe we don't communicate well. Do you see me? I'm starting to tear up. And I think that it's really, really hard. But whatever you're doing as a parent, keep doing it. And if you and your gut feel like you can do better, or you should do better, or you should be more present, then do that. You know exactly that. All the answers to pretty much everything in life is inside all of us. We have a gut for a reason, and we know. You know what I mean? We just know. And I would say, I hope that my sons will look back and realize I never was trying to force them to do anything. I used to always say, as long as they have a motor to do something, I don't care. Education was a huge deal for my family growing up. It was, you were I guess you could say, some people would say you were brainwashed, you were indoctrinated with this stuff, like they do with certain things. But my father used to say, just to show you, like low key, that there was always an expectation that you would go to college, even for my kids, when the boys were, like the older guys were really little and they were being burped as babies, and one of them would let out one of these echoey burp. I mean, babies sometimes, Jesus Christ, they sound like a party favor. They're like exploding from both ends, and it's all kinds of noise. And he would go, that's a dorm room quality burp. They're going to love you in the dorm, right? Low key telling you, education, college, it's always talked about. It's an expectation. It's built in. That's what you do. I think that, again, you got to know your kids. What's best for them? What is the greatest thing? We can say college is not for everybody, and it sounds trite. It's not. And if that's not who your kid is, then why force them to do something that's going to make them miserable? I mean, I do agree, working hard at something and getting through it and seeing the end result, there's a great satisfaction to that. There's nothing better than that. Thus, me going back to school, right? Once I get through this, it'll be amazing. Right now, there are days where I feel like I'm underwater. But that doesn't have to be college. That could be something else. And that's why I really hope my kids will always feel, because I think that's one of the gifts my dad gave us, was we were able to find our own voice. And one other thing, the reason I got into radio, kind of my dad's, not the reason I got into radio. Let me rephrase that. How I got my first radio job is kind of my dad's fault. In that, the morning guy who was on the big rocker in Poughkeepsie, New York, sent out a thing and had all 6th grade classes write PSAs, public service announcements against drugs, something like that. And it was some kind of radio thing, and he would pick, right? And then the kids were to come down to the radio station and record them. Now, I had dropped off a tape and a resume from my community college station at the time before I went to Fisher, and I did all that. And I wasn't getting any callbacks. And then my dad says, why don't you come in and teach the 6th graders in my class how to write PSAs? So I went in for a day, and I taught the kids how to write PSAs because I had learned in college. And then on the day of the recording, I think it was a Sunday in the spring. My father's like, I'm not giving up my Sunday. I work too hard. Blah, 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 blah. Go down there, because they picked kids from every school. I think there were 5 kids from every school, so there were 5 kids from his school. And they needed a representative from the school. And he said to me, go down to the radio station and be my representative. So I went down there, and I started talking to management people. I figured out who the radio management people were. And I said, hey, I dropped off a tape and a resume. I'm really interested. And I got hired because of that. So it was kind of, see what I'm saying? Like, so as much as I could say he had no interest in radio, but he didn't discourage me. And I think that's the greatest thing. Let everybody find their own way. Be there to guide them, keep them on the rails, so to speak, right? Let's not let you hurt yourself. Like my old man used to say to me, I'm not here to ruin your good time. I'm just here to keep you alive. I think that's it. But parenting is not an easy job, and it is pretty rewarding. I mean, you got to admit that, right? You watch your kid play sports, you beam with pride when they do something great, right? You watch your kids achieve something, you beam with pride, right? But it's not you, it's them. It's them, and it's their life, and I think sometimes that's pretty hard for a lot of us, and we have seen cases. I mean, Marinovich in football, right? His dad just all the time, and he just hated it in the end. He hated it. Was one of the most gifted athletic guys on the planet, and yet just resented because it was kind of forced down his throat. It was almost as though his dad was living vicariously through him. And I guess if there's anything in what I'm saying, it's go with your gut. It's not your life, it's theirs. See the flaws in everybody. You have them too. We all do. I do, certainly. Jesus. And do the best you can. And when it all is over, like it is for my dad, at least on this planet, I I look back fondly, and I hope my guys do that, even though it's tough. And when I think about it, I gave my old man a run for his money, and not even with the funny stuff, like, fart powder and calling him when he burned his hands. Like, and that would be mild compared to car wrecks and girlfriends and speeding tickets and drop mufflers on the side of the highway where I need him to come out and figure out how the fuck I'm going to get this wreck home. And like, he did it all. And that's the job of the parent. It is not easy. So keep going, and thank you for listening. This is brief, and we'll be back with a longer one tomorrow. Because Danny's got thoughts on the Buffalo Bills. And I got to tell you about my brother in this Metamucil. It's changed my life. I know. I'm Bill Moran. We'll see you tomorrow.
I woke up in a hotel, didn't know what to do. I turned the TV